We're back. This time we're going to be taking a look at a game a friend of mine let me borrow and I really liked, so I'm probably going to pick up a copy myself. This time it's Sheriff of Nottingham by Arcane Wonders. And it's a bluffing type game where you're basically trying to guess what the other players are doing. You work as merchants in the city of Nottingham. You're trying to smuggle things into your merchant booth inside the city. Meanwhile, the sheriff has to decide if he trusts you or not and tries to inspect your bags. And depending on if you're carrying what you're saying you are, you have to get paid for that. Or if you're lying, you have to pay fines and some of your things get confiscated. So it's a really interesting game, and we'll get in and take a look. So the first thing we have here is our merchant boards. These are what the players are going to use. There is only one female one, which is kind of disappointing. With 5, you think there should have been at least 2. But these are the player boards. This is where you're going to put the things that you end up getting into the city to put on your cart. There's a section for your contraband and all the other basic goods. And then you score accordingly. You get bonuses for having the most out of all the other players and the second most out of all the players at the end of the game. Then we have our rule book here. It's pretty thick considering the gameplay is relatively simple. And they have a layout of how things are going to go during the game. There's special rules for playing smaller games. And they do a really good job of giving you examples of every possible scenario that you can go through as the game progresses. Does a really good job of explaining things. A lot of books leave some pretty vague entries here and there, and this one does a really good job of hitting on just about everything you need to know to play a decent game. And on the last few pages they have some optional rules that add a little bit more variety to the game, and some customization to make it a little bit more to certain people's playing styles. And on the back, this is the only really time-consuming thing if you're going to change up your number of players. There's a chart on the back page that says how many cards of each type that you should include in your deck depending on the number of players. And it's got a little cheat sheet that tells you the values and penalties for each of the cards. If you're only going to ever play with 3 players or a certain amount of players, then you don't have to worry about this. You're just going to use whatever you had from the previous game, which does speed things up. But if you ever do have to change the deck, going through to find specific cards and add them in or pull them out, it's kind of a pain, but definitely nothing game breaking. Next we have the merchant bags. They're color coded. There's one for each player. It's an interesting concept in the game. The only concern I have is that over time the cards are going to end up damaged because of this. They're really nice. They're like felt bags with a snap enclosure. And you choose the cards from your hand that you're going to try to bring into the city that day. You slide them in here and then you snap this shut. Once they're snapped shut, you can't change anything. And then the sheriff has to decide whose bags, if any, he's going to inspect. And then you can try to bribe him to not do it or whatever. It's an interesting little concept, but like I said, the cards are a pretty snug fit for the bags. And after several playthroughs of the game, I'm just not sure how much wear and tear they're going to get. I mean, there's a good amount of extra room, so you might be able to do it with sleeved cards, but it's going to be really hard to get sleeve cards in and out of there. So it'd be interesting to see how the game holds up after multiple plays. That and the yellow bag seems impossible to keep dirty. You can already see it's getting kind of scuzzy on us, and we've only played the game twice. Next you have your standee marker for who's currently the sheriff. This starts at one player, and after each round this goes on to the next player. The game ends when everybody's been the sheriff twice in a big game or 3 times in a smaller game. And he's the one who makes the decisions on whose bags to inspect and accepts the bribes and makes deals with players for not inspecting their bags and things like that. And the actual box here actually comes with some interesting things. You have the bank tray here. Has a nice spot in the back where you can put the bags. And the deck tray is actually removable. And you're going to use this when you play. And you have your main deck in the middle. And there's actually 2 discard piles. And you can discard stuff to either pile, but they have to stay in the pile they go in. And when it comes your turn, you can either draw new cards from here or pick them up out of the discard pile. But you have to start at the top of the pile and work your way down. So if you want the 3rd card down, you have to take all 3. It's an interesting mechanic. The trade-off is if you draw from here, nobody knows what you're getting. If you draw from the discard pile, everybody knows what you're picking up. And if there's contraband or things in there that could get you in trouble, everybody knows you picked that up and have it in your hand now, so eventually you're going to want to play that card, try to smuggle it in and make some money off of it. So it kind of gives the sheriff an idea of what's in your hand, and you can use that to your advantage as well to bluff. The actual deck itself varies depending on how many players. There's certain cards that have a icon in the corner that you're only going to use if you play with 4 or more players. We've been playing 3 players, so most of them are already separated here. And then there are these basically luxury royal type cards, which are worth bonuses in the game, but all of which are considered illegal smuggling. So in a base game, they tell you not to play with any, just to learn the rules. And then there's a handful that you can throw in, and then again with those, there's the ones that are for 4 or more players. At the end of the game, they count as 2 of whatever they are, and they're worth a bit more money, which definitely makes them useful. So in the main deck, you have all your different goods. There's apples. There's a handful of illegal things like silk, peppers. Can't remember all the different illegal things. They're all mixed in here. Mead. And the idea is you want to make sets of these. You're going to try to bring them into the city by putting cards in your bag. You can put 1 to 5 cards in your bag. But they can be any mix of anything you want. But when the sheriff asks you, you have to do you have to follow 3 rules. You have to say only one type of thing. So regardless of what you put in there, you could have this here, 2 apples, a cheese, and some silk in your bag. If they ask you, you have to say there's 4 cards. You are only allowed to pick one thing, so you tell them there's 4 apples. And you're not allowed to say that there's contraband in there. And then if he decides to inspect your bag, if everything's as you say it is, they're going to pay you for your time and effort just for delaying you. If you're lying, like in this case, we're obviously lying, the goods are going to get confiscated, you're going to have to pay a fine for them, but you get to keep the actual things that were in there as you claimed. It's an interesting game. There's a little more to it than that, but it's kind of hard to go without actually playing it and seeing how it works. There's these coins here. Everybody starts with 50, and depending on what you get throughout the game, you're going to add up money, make change. One player basically has to play the banker. And the idea at the end of the game is to have the most amount of money. And again, the game ends after everybody's had a chance at being the sheriff. Twice in a large game, 3 times in a smaller game. It is a lot of fun though, especially if you got friends who are good at bluffing. And you can make deals. If the person who's playing the sheriff is going to inspect your bag and you know what's in there is not what you said it was, you can try to make a deal with him to maybe do something a little less hurtful than the penalties you might get if they open the bag and find out what's really in there. At the same time, if he's trying to open your bag and it is exactly what you say, you can bluff and try to make some kind of deal with them, knowing that they're not going to accept your deal, and they open the bag, find out it's exactly what you said it is, and then they owe you. So it's a really interesting game to bluff and use politics to really tailor it to your group's game style. There's a lot of different possibilities of the way things can go. All in all, though, it's a really fun game, depending on the group of people you're playing with. Definitely an interesting one. I'm going to be picking up a copy myself, I believe. I had enough fun with it to warrant adding it to my collection, that's for sure. That's it for this one, and we'll see you in the next video.